again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, return of the dense smoke advisory here from the fires over the Kenai Peninsula that seem like have gone on all summer. Looking for visibilities down to possibly a quarter mile, especially overnight tonight and into early tomorrow morning for the interior of the peninsula here. But looks like it's spread into western Prince William Sound down towards Seward, and not for northern Cook Inlet there. And this advisory is out until midday Wednesday tomorrow. Otherwise, no watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere else in the state today, or at least for the next 24 hours or so. Fire danger, not much different from yesterday here, especially over the Kenai Peninsula. Matanuska, Susitna Valley areas all in the high to very high danger zones there. Turnagain Arm, really dry conditions. Also the Copper River Basin, about the same as yesterday there. And have extreme now due to kind of a pickup in the winds, or it was due to a pickup in the winds here with the sunshine, dry conditions for the Kamishak Gap area there east of King Salmon. And in and around King Salmon, they got high to very high fire danger, as well as down toward, looks like Point Hope, possibly to, or not Point Hope, Pilot Point, down to Port Hayden. And they'll probably continue into tomorrow as well. Moving on, satellite imagery, we continue to have these surges of moisture with the Arctic jet, the westerly flow up here along the north slope and the Arctic coast. And anywhere from a half inch to 3/4 of an inch of rain fell during the last 24 hours up along the north slope there, and that's caused pretty significant rises to the rivers across the entire area there. Today, we had some of that moisture tried to sneak on down to the south here, but really falling apart as it comes, just mostly clouds. Did bring some light moisture in across the Yukon Delta, possibly into the Kuskokwim Delta, just a few hundredths of an inch though, and this is just will continue to fall apart as it moves east and southeast and just result in some variable mid or high level clouds getting east of the Alaska Range, and should be dry up over the Tanana Valley. Otherwise, sunshine, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay today, and showers over the southeast coast. You can see the storm moving through the low center, both at the surface and loft now east of the area, and showers are beginning to taper or beginning to wind down or become less, and they'll end tonight. Ketchikan picked up about 2 inches of rain. That was a storm total from this storm, right around 2 inches or so, while Metlakatla had 1 1/3 inches, as well as Haida, and Cake had 3/4 of an inch. Juneau picked up 1 1/3 inches of rain, so that kind of helped the low rainfall conditions we've been seeing there for some time. And back out to the west, a not so strong frontal boundary, more or less, pushing eastward here, bringing about 2/10 of an inch of rain today to the Adak area there, as well as Atka. And that cloud shield just now getting into the, pushing up toward the Pribilof Islands. Here's the location of the front on the chart today at, well, currently with rain over Adak and Atka, and showers, fog, low clouds. In fact, Shimei had a 1/4 mile in dense fog earlier today, and a little bit of drizzle to go along with it. High pressure keeping it dry over the Bering Sea, but a lot of clouds out here, and that westerly flow over the top bringing that moisture in, and that very weak disturbance here with some isolated scattered showers, kind of increasing as you get up over the central interior. Main rain area along the frontal boundary here, and the frontal boundary is a little farther south than it has been, but the moisture is kind of getting backed up on the north side of the Brooks Range there, and that's where the most of the precipitation fell today. Otherwise, sunshine here across south central Alaska. Seward up to 72, even though they had like a mile to a mile and a half of smoke today, with north winds of 10 to 20 miles an hour. And let's see, 74 degrees at, I believe it's Skilak Guard Station today was the warm spot in the state. And Valdez pushed up to 70 as well. Anchorage at Merrill Field, 72 degrees. So very nice conditions here across southern Alaska down to Kodiak Island. A little breezy there, northwest 15 to 25 in gusts. With that trough axis off to your east there, that keeps you in the dry offshore flow. Showers winding down, still lingering more over the southern areas than they are to the north, but they'll be ending tonight, and just some clouds left by, say, 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. Should look something like this. Dry conditions with just variable clouds across southern Alaska. Kodiak Island should be clear. High pressure here, western Bristol Bay, southeast Bering will make it for light winds and some clearing. Could be some fog in there as well, and that's going to keep this system, try to hold it back to the west. There's a narrow band of small craft advisory level winds just in advance of that front. And we still have the stationary frontal boundary here across the Brooks Range, but the precipitation field with it is kind of breaking up. It's not solid along the entire front. It's kind of just surges of moisture moving eastward along that boundary. And that'll continue through tonight, but the trend will be for lighter amounts of rain and maybe a little bit longer break in between over the next couple of days. But forecast for tomorrow still up there, still wet, still unsettled, still cloudy. Maybe not so wet over the Arctic coast areas and possible clearing. Sunshine across southern Alaska, Bristol Bay right into the Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast. Temperatures 65 to 75 for the highs again, and throw the southeast coast into that for tomorrow as well. And the outlook for Thursday. Again, this front now really weakening, just some showers and mostly cloudy skies up here with it. And as that whole pattern starts to break up a little bit. High pressure should be partly mostly sunny, dry conditions. Real nice day coming up for the southern 2/3 of the state. And even the North Slope and Arctic coast, you're going to be out of the moisture field there as well. And sunshine now for the Panhandle, high 60s, maybe the lower 70s. And this front makes for wet conditions from the Pribilofs right on down toward the Alaska Peninsula. Periods of light rain, but wind's not much of a factor at all. Maybe a little breezy here on the north side of that, which may be up to 25 in gusts for St. Lawrence Island, possibly more likely St. Matthew Island. And not a lot coming in behind that, just some isolated showers there with some clearing periods for the Aleutians. And for lows tonight, in the 40s, maybe upper 30s for the Copper River Basin areas, otherwise 45 to 50 Kenai Peninsula, lower 50s Kodiak, 40s to near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, mid-30s, mid to upper 30s for the North Slope and the Arctic coast, and the Panhandle, mid-40s to lower 50s. Highs for tomorrow into the 60s, upper 60s up toward Haines and Skagway, so a little warmer than today. And 65 to 75 again, south central Alaska, Bristol Bay, maybe the Copper River Basin more in the 65 to 70 degree range, upper 50s, lower 60s, central interior, 40s from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. And then the lows the following morning for Thursday morning, looks like 35 to 40 here for the eastern North Slope and central and eastern Arctic coast, as well as eastern Brooks Range. South of the mountains, 40s, and 45 to 50 all the way down to the North Gulf Coast, with your highs coming back in on Thursday, 65 to 70 for the Susitna Valley, mid-60s in the central interior, and near 70 in the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic for Wednesday morning tomorrow. Lots of IFR, central Bering Sea here, just west of the Pribilofs on out to the Komodorskis. A couple of batches here near Unalaska Island and north side of the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR right up over the interior. And again, trying to push past the Alaska Range. Bristol Bay, though, stays in the IFR along with Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin, and the extreme northern Panhandle. And then as you head down the coast there, IFR coming back into the picture by tomorrow morning or late tonight, tomorrow morning. Then for tomorrow afternoon, shifts off the coast here and becomes VFR over the much of the inside water areas, with marginal clinging to the coastline all the way up in toward Prince William Sound. IFR, southern Brooks Range here, northern Koyukuk Valley right out to the Bering Strait, marginal to the north, marginal to the south, and southern Alaska VFR. IFR creeping in eastward here in toward the Pribilofs and still a fair distance from Nikolsky. Then for Thursday morning, IFR across all the Aleutians. Now it's to the Pribilofs, up to St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait and just west of Nome, and then on up to just south of Point Hope down to Kivalina and possibly Kotzebue eastward. Southern slopes of the Brooks Range, North Slope Arctic coast, marginal. Mostly VFR here, southern Alaska. Got some IFR though, slipping on up toward southern Montague Island, and marginal VFR into the eastern Kenai Peninsula. All of Prince William Sound looks marginal for the afternoon. on Thursday, and then right down along the southeast coast. I'm sorry, that's for the morning Thursday. The afternoon looks really nice there for the southeast coast with VFR conditions, and marginal VFR up to Yakutat over to Cape St. Elias, Yakataga, and into Prince William Sound. And IFR, the east side of Kodiak Island, and just south of Kane's Head there in Resurrection Bay. Looks like a swath of marginal VFR now for the afternoon Thursday. Cook Inlet right up into the Alaska Range and parts of the Susitna Valley. Matanuska Valley, Copper River Basin stay VFR, and patchy IFR, mostly southern slopes of the Brooks Range again, and marginal for the Arctic coast, and IFR out over the Bering Sea. And for passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, IFR tomorrow with Adigan, Anatuvik and Adigan, both occasionally IFR. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, pretty good. VFR tomorrow, VFR for Rainy as well, windy VFR. Isabella and Mentasta looking pretty good with VFR flying forecast for those passes. And Tanita, another VFR day, much like today coming up. And Portage, VFR as well. Chilkoot and White, VFR. And for freezing levels, still have that gradient here across the north slope, and that's and with that is a jet, Arctic jet, continuing to flow west to east, parallel to the isotherms there, and bringing the rain and which result in elevated river levels up there over the north slope. It looks like that's going to continue. 2,000 feet there, just south of the central Arctic coast. 8,000 feet though, all the way up to the Noatak Valley, southward to the Alaska Peninsula. 10 to 12,000 for the Aleutians, and 8 to 10,000 or so central southern panhandle, or across the entire area there with the 10,000 foot isotherm over Dixon Entrance. Icing, no icing down there for the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, the interior, with those surges of moisture traveling from west to east here. And the frontal boundary a little farther south now, so right over the Brooks Range could be some isolated considerable moderate rime icing above 5,000 feet. Better chance though with this system coming up, could be in a zone of considerable moderate in advance of the frontal boundary, and that'll spread up toward Nunivak Island in the late afternoon, but stay south of the St. Lawrence Island area and west of the Alaska Peninsula. Jet stream showing split in the flow here, so that's going to tend to slow that system down as it comes eastward here. One branch heading up to the north. High pressure in over Alaska basically here with a low down to the south. This jet cutting in just south of the Panhandle now, and 9,000 feet. 20 to 25 knot winds here ahead of that storm over the eastern Bering Sea. Pretty light with high pressure southern Alaska, including the Panhandle. West 25 in the Arctic coast. West 25 extreme Arctic coast 3,000 feet, otherwise pretty light, 5 to 15 knots, or even lighter under the ridge. Panhandle 25 to 35 ahead of that storm. With it, occasional light to isolated moderate chop as far as turbulence goes.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car.
Oh yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Right. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. There's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire. Okay. The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain.
Right.
This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know where the burn scars are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scars can be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So really important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Ah, good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a very active year. We've got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into the volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see. We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior. Here's another image. The same satellite pass as that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band. 0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny, but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful. Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue. That's glaciers and snow in the mountains. So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white, icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right? We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown patches. All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. But then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time, and snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared, and the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016. We're just about to get into breakup. We got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, Then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the veggie band.
Tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep, eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis. Not a lot changed from yesterday. Still hundreds of miles off the coast of off the Arctic coast here, and not a lot of change expected over the next few days. Just kind of floating around there, and the direction of movement depends on the currents and the winds it encounters. So going to the coastal water forecast, variable 10 to 15 on the south coast here, seas 5 feet. East winds 10 to 15 on the north coast, seas there running 5 to 6 feet. Inside waters, light winds, light and variable winds, 10 knots for the entire area there, with seas 2 to maybe 3 feet. Outlook for Thursday, north 15 for Clarence Strait, northwest 10, Stevens Passage, and Lynn Canal here, north at 15, with seas running 2 to 3 feet. And north winds of 15 knots for most of the coastline out here, with seas at 4 feet, and northwest at 15 for the extreme north coast. Cook Inlet, northeast, 10 knots tomorrow with 2-foot seas, maybe 3 feet south of the Forelands. Northwest at 20 there for the Kamishak Bay area, northwest 15, Barren Islands. East-northeast at 15 for the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound, northeast at 10, seas 2 feet. And then for Thursday, Prince William Sound, northwest at 10 with seas 2 feet. Really staying light here. Most areas just variable at 10 for the North Gulf Coast. To the Barren Islands, seas 2 to 3 feet. Kamishak Bay, southeast 15 with 4-foot seas. That's going to be the windiest place out of the bunch here, with Cook Inlet southerlies or south-southwest at 10 knots with seas roughly at about 3 feet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, northwest winds, but only 10 knots. Not all that brisk at all, with seas running 2 to 4 feet. Sitkinak to Castle Cape, northwest at 15. And Pacific side of the peninsula here, northwest at 10, 3-foot seas. Bering Sea side, Cape Sarachef on up to, say, Chignik there, southeast at 15, and northwest at 10 for Bristol Bay. For the following day on Thursday, you'll see a pretty good increase in the winds here. Small craft advisories coming in for the Alaska Peninsula. Southeast 25 to 30 knots, strongest on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, with seas at 6 to 7 feet. Southeast 20, Bristol Bay. And from Castle Cape right on up the east side of Kodiak Island, winds will be southeast at 15, with a more easterly direction there for Shelikof Strait. For the Fox Islands tomorrow, definitely much windier here, south to southeast, 30 to 35 knots, with the gales mostly over western Unmak Island area toward Nikolsky, and small craft advisories for south to southeast at 25 here for the central Aleutians, and west behind the front winds will be westerly at 20, falling back to 15 knots toward Chimian at 2. Thursday, west winds 15 to 20 knots here for the western Aleutians, right up to Adak. For the central Aleutians, small craft advisories west 25. And Unalaska Island, southwest 30 to 35 knots, so gales on the north side of the island there, and 20 to 25 knot winds for Unmac Island. Southwest coast, south to southeast, 20 knots here, and southwest for St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound, only at about 15 knots. 30 knot southeast winds for St. Matthew Island, and 30 knot southerly winds with 9-foot seas for St. Paul and St. George. And for the next day, that 30 knot wind continues southeast for St. Paul and St. George, Pribilof Island, seas 10 feet, east 30 knots for St. Matthew Island, and southeast winds along the southwest coast at 25 knots, 20 knot southeasterlies for St. Lawrence Island, and southeast at 10 for Norton Sound. For the central and eastern coast, Arctic coast, Beaufort Sea coast, west winds tomorrow at 15 knots, pretty uniform there, 3 to 4 foot seas. And then the west side, northeast of 15, pick up to 20 knots from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, and then light southwest breeze on down to the Bering Strait at Wales. And that continues through Thursday from Wales up to about Cape Thompson, southwest at 10, and then east 15 to Cape Beaufort, northeast 15 on the west side, light, really light winds on the central coast, and east or west-northwest at 10 for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For tonight again, periods of rain, stays unsettled and wet, and look for additional rainfall, and the rivers are high from these recent rains, but drier on the Arctic coast, and a lot drier with high pressure taking over southern half of Alaska into the Panhandle as the showers finally move off to the east. The next front pushing rain eastward in the Bering Sea and Aleutians. Should make it to Unmac Island and the Pribilofs tomorrow. Sunshine 65 to 75 in most areas here across southern Alaska, up into the central interior. And then still rain with this system that dissipates on Thursday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.